how I went from being a crime victim to becoming a firearms instructor. Ignorance is bliss until you meet a predator. Not too long ago, I lived my life as you probably do today. I was a law-abiding citizen who went faithfully about his business, as you probably do. I went to work every day, spent quality time with my family, regularly attended church services, and didn't stick my nose into the affairs of other people. I dutifully exercised my civic duties such as voting in every election, maintaining my home inside and out, and supporting the general affairs of the city of my birth, Detroit, Michigan. Further, I felt that I had the basic routine of ensuring my family's safety covered. I owned a shotgun, and I kept plenty of shells on hand for home defense and maintained a continual state of vigilance. Despite my best efforts of trying to be safe in an increasingly dangerous town, my world was suddenly and violently turned upside down on one eventful night. As I was returning home one evening from a full day of work, I was approached by and robbed at gunpoint by two young guys in my own backyard. My own garage had become a crime scene. How to get robbed in your own backyard. I suffered the indignity of being a crime victim, having a gun shoved in my face while being relieved of a few paltry and essentially worthless material possessions, a booty worth less than a total of $50. After it was all said and done, I experienced a bruise to my ego that wouldn't be fully felt until several days had since passed, when family and friends would later blame me for being a crime victim. It could have been much worse. I could have been shot, killed, which seems to be the case in Detroit armed robberies, from time to time. To be totally honest, I had fully expected to be shot due to the fact that I had steadfastly and boldly refused to accompany my assailants at gunpoint to an ATM machine to retrieve more cash, and I refused to chaperone them into my house so that they could present a threat to my family that they thought was there. Unless you have experienced a robbery for yourself, there's no true way to describe it so you can fully appreciate the trespass I felt on that night. I made my peace and was resolved to be shot, possibly to death, in my own backyard. At the time, father of four, wonderful children. Although I had adequate life insurance, what kind of life would kids live without having their father in their life? I grew up without a father who died when I was 12 years of age. My dad had adequate life insurance, so I was able to go to college. But the void that I felt in my life would be ever present. I think of him every day, at least once. I know what that feels like, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I procrastinated away the opportunity to defend myself. More than anything, I was maddened by the experience. Not only was I mad at the two thugs that robbed me, mad at the negligent parents of our city who have no clue as to what their children and their young folks do in the dark. But I was even madder at myself. You see, by this point in time, The CPL laws in Michigan had changed several years beforehand, such that law-abiding citizens such as myself could have applied for and received the privilege, and I do mean privilege, because you have to apply for it, of carrying a concealed pistol on their person. Had I applied at that point in time, somewhere around 2001, I would have had a gun to defend myself in my time of need. The situational circumstances of my robbery were such that my awareness of on that night would have given me enough time and space to react. However, there was one problem. I didn't have a gun. Never assume that bad things never happen to good people. Upon further analysis, my major problem prior to the robbery was that despite the increasing number of violent crimes being reported in the media, I had allowed myself to be lulled into a false sense of security. After all, I was at that time married, 4 kids, nice home in a middle-class neighborhood, didn't hang out in bars, clubs, did not associate with people of questionable character, and was often in bed by 10 p.m. At that point in my life, although I had experienced several petty property crimes, at my residence, such as, a few car break-ins, one burglary of the home, even a theft of a built-in outdoor barbecue grill, a couple of car eggings, probably kids. I thought that I was reasonably safe, given my low-key lifestyle. I couldn't have been more wrong. Nice neighborhoods, it seems, are often air markets for criminals. Deluded potential victims and a lack of firearms carried by area residents. Instead of taking a clue from the daily crime reports, as detailed in the nightly newscasts, I had put off the idea of getting a concealed pistol license because I felt I didn't need one today. I let the everyday, mundane tasks of going to work, attending family social functions, getting haircuts, shopping for clothes and other items, stand in the way of securing my most basic right, the right to be safe and secure in my own person. I had let the unimportant tasks and chores, day-to-day living, keep me from doing that which was most important. Getting robbed is bad enough. The aftermath is worse. My experience was made even worse by the inconveniences I had to endure in the aftermath. For starters, I had to call a locksmith to replace all the locks on my home. I had to catch a city bus to a suburban car dealership to get a dummy key made to unlock the ignition in my car so that I could have it towed away and then have all the locks replaced. Have new car keys reprogrammed and have the new keys cut. Further, I had to replace all of my identification, driver's license, work ID, parking lot badge, AAA cars, voter registration ID, library card, report my credit card stolen, change my banking information, and get a new ATM card. I lost a few personal photos and now had the specter of being an identity theft victim. That $50 robbery actually cost me $1,000 and lost time in work. I would have come out cheaper if I had written my assailants a $100 check and let me keep my wallet and key ring. The big secret: no one cares if you get robbed, raped, or victimized. To add insult to injury, I had to explain to various people why I needed their assistance. Essentially, I had to tell them that I was a victim of an armed robbery in my own backyard. Invariably, everyone who I talked to found it somehow within themselves, in one way or another, to basically blame me for my victimization. Furthermore, I had to make several attempts to file a crime report with the respective detective on the case because he was on vacation and no one seemed to know when he'd be back. I felt victimized all over again. Here I am, a crime victim, wanting to do the right thing, to help the police find my assailants. And they were making petty arguments between themselves over who gets to file the paperwork. I had come to the conclusion that the police didn't really care about me being victimized. Never mind that the old neighborhood precinct was shuttered some time ago when the police departments consolidated, and that I had to travel a considerable distance to continually drop in and try to find the respective detective that wanted to take the report. On several occasions, I thought about not bothering to fill out the paperwork, not to go through the process. I had to go through so much trouble just to officially report the crime. However, I thought that my report might somehow make a difference for someone else. Maybe, just maybe, someone wouldn't experience the trespass I experienced because my crime report made someone in the police department do something about it. Increase patrols in the area, interviews with known suspects, put together a criminal lineup, or something. Anything. When I did finally catch up with the appropriate officer, he performed his role of investigator admirably. But neither he nor his colleagues were around when I needed them most, at the robbery scene. I spent about an hour giving the detectives all the details of the crime I could recall and muster, several days after the occurrence. However small, in an effort that might reveal a pattern or a clue which might suggest known suspects to the officers. I guess I watched too much TV. Most crimes, if reported at all, are not solved. No one seems to care too much unless there's a dead body associated with the crime. Even then, it seems that unless the outrage from the community is great, nothing ever comes of it. Did the police ever solve the murder? Would they solve any murders? We see crimes all the time. What is the case closure rate? It's not very good. After I spilled my guts to the detective, I inquired about the process of receiving a concealed pistol license. His reaction was not very pleasant. He didn't do or say anything offensive, but he dismissed my idea as contributing to the problem. Anyhow, he told me to go to police headquarters and that the information that I was looking for could be found there. The first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. Many people, such as the person that I used to be, stand on the sidelines of the Second Amendment gun ownership situation until something adverse happens to them or to someone they know or love. Personally, I never had a perceived need for a handgun. I had previously viewed owning a gun as a novelty and perhaps a waste of hard-earned cash. I had bought into all the misleading anti-gun propaganda being spewed vociferously by various people and special interests with hidden agendas. I never bothered to research the facts on gun ownership for myself. I felt that that task was up to someone else. I took it upon myself to question the media and how they select stories and their stance. Speeches from various government office officials who enact feel-good legislation that don't work, or they do stuff like conduct gun buybacks that can't be effectively evaluated for effectiveness, or just barbershop talk. Many people in the community who discuss their feelings about guns rather than honest-to-God facts. My problem was that I allowed other people to do my thinking for me on the subject of guns and personal protection. I had sensed, reevaluated the situation, and then insourced that function back to the person I trusted the most, me. Everybody knows everything until something happens. Well, something did happen to me. I was robbed in my own backyard while parking my car in the garage. Prior to this event, I did not see myself as a potential victim. I've always been able to hold my own and handle my business whenever I needed to do so throughout my life. The mere idea that someone would have the audacity to size me up as a victim never crossed my mind. A gun in the hand of a violent predator who has no qualms about using violence or the threat of violence to accomplish their evil purposes changes the natural order of the food chain. I then knew that I needed to make a few changes. Consequently, I then chose to get on the playing field. To my surprise, I have been warmly greeted by the pro-gun right side and have been consequently stunned and shunned by the guns are evil side. Making the decision to own a firearms makes you a gun nut in the eyes of many ignorant people. The uninformed and unenlightened folks will treat you differently and are prone to making snide comments about you. They'll either tell you that they don't need a gun because of where they live, or they'll probably demonstrate some type of kung fu move they learned out of a video game. They couldn't possibly be more wrong. However, I'll patiently wait until something happens to them, and I'll forget and forgive all the ignorant things that they said, and I will warmly welcome them to the correct side. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step: gun ownership. Anyhow, after filing the crime report at my not-so-local neighborhood police station, I headed downtown to acquire a 10-day purchase permit. The gun licensing department ran my background to see if I had any official governmental prohibitions, felonies against owning a firearm. Of course, the check came back clean, so I was issued the purchase permit. I was now able to legally buy a gun within the next 10 days. If I failed to do so, buy a gun, I would have to come back downtown and repeat the process. Next, I went to a local gun shop without haste and bought my first handgun. I didn't let the ominous signs warning customers about pulling out guns because they might get shot, or the fact that all the gun shop employees were openly carrying guns on their hips, deter me. I had no idea of what to buy, so I bought the handgun that my brother-in-law owned. If it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. That's how I reasoned it away anyway. I didn't originally plan on spending several $100s on my purchase, but my first and only thought was to buy the best gun I could afford, even if a few utility bills didn't get paid on time that month. My life and my safety were worth at least a ding or two on my credit report. In retrospect, a gun dealer didn't offer me a lot of information, a lot of customer service. To his credit, maybe he assumed that since I was a guy that I knew what I wanted. In fact, I didn't know much about guns at all at the time. My ignorance was my fault. The dealer's fault was not asking me enough questions to allow me to best assess my needs. However, his insensitivity did not stop me from suggesting additional purchases. He suggested I also pick up some jacketed hollow points and an inside the waistband holster. Pure luck, it seems, brought a gun into my possession that fit my hand perfectly. I couldn't test fire it. At gun shop, they didn't have a gun range. So I had to take it on faith that I could handle shooting it. I must have filled out a ream of paperwork that day. It was like closing on a house. Anyhow, it's funny now recounting the experience because I was in all truth nervous while carrying my newly encased gun from the back entrance of the gun shop to my car. I mused how ironic and funny it would be if I was to now be robbed with my new gun in a box at a gun shop on my way to my car. My next stop on my personal armament tour would be to venture back downtown to police headquarters to have my new firearm safety inspected. Before having my gun inspected, I had no idea of what tests they were going to perform to properly test my gun. After all, the safety inspection was a requirement of the law. I was ignorant of the process, even though I witnessed it with my very own eyes. Bottom line, by the time I left police headquarters, this time, my name and personal information and the fact that I owned a handgun were now entered into some database. On my departure from police headquarters, I picked up a copy of an application for a concealed pistol license application from the front desk. I opened the envelope and read the application. It was rather lengthy, but informative. I figured that I could peruse it more thoroughly in my car. Right before I left the building, I asked a nearby police officer for a place where I could go and shoot my new gun. He mentioned a range and told me how to get there. I'll do anything at least once, even shoot a gun. So my big adventure continued is I went to a local range to shoot a handgun for the very first time in my life. For the record, it is not recommended to visit a gun range without first taking a gun safety class, or at the very least, taking along a knowledgeable shooter, with you to make sure you're safe, you don't do anything stupid. In fact, it's dangerous. I didn't know any better. You've heard my story thus far, so now you know. Ignorance kills. And we've all heard that passage from the Bible that my people perish for lack of knowledge. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was lucky. Any number of things, all of them bad, could have happened that day. Fortunately for me, I checked my ego at the door and asked someone behind the counter for some help. I got a very basic but critical 20-second tutorial. Don't load it until you're in the booth. Always keep it pointed down range. Position your hands so that they are not in the path of the slide, and then load the gun before you leave the booth. I managed not to hurt myself or anyone else that day. However, if I had experienced a hang fire or a squib load in the booth, things might have turned out a little differently. I must say that I was rather proud of myself after shooting. Shooting was actually an enjoyable experience. Actually, it was a blast, pun intended. My adrenaline was pumping. I was high off of shooting a gun. I guess I had just found myself a new and exciting hobby. As I was driving home from the range that afternoon, still mentally digesting the requirements of a concealed pistol license, I had arrived at an intersection whereby the stoplight had just turned red. The car in front of me had an advertisement on the back of his vehicle. He was advertising a CCW class. More than ever, I believe that when your mind is truly ready for something, it will appear. This situation merely provided confirmation. I immediately called a displayed telephone number and discovered that there was a class being held on the very next day. I RSVP'd and took the class on the very next day. A responsible gun owner needs training. During the class, I learned a staggering amount of information about the safe usage, storage, loading, unloading, handling, purchasing, transporting, and maintenance of firearms. Before that day, I truly did not know how much I didn't know about guns. I was introduced to the nomenclature of all of the firearms constituent parts on both a revolver and a semi-automatic. I learned how the parts interoperated to create a discharge, learned the legal aspects of self-defense and lethal force, learned how the media and certain powers that be distort the truth and spread outright lies about handguns. I learned the proper fundamentals of shooting a firearm, learned a few shooting stances, and learned how to become a more hardened target. More than anything, I was a little disheartened by my instructor's admonition that I was now not a gunfighter. I was told in plain and not so uncertain language that I had now just met the state's minimum requirements to qualify for a concealed pistol license. Thus, I was just given another clue that there was much more to learn about firearms and their role in personal protection. I still didn't know what I didn't know. I then dedicated my spare time to devouring any literature that I could buy or find on the internet that could fill in any blanks that I had. I discovered and studied the works of many authors: Colonel Jeff Cooper's The Art of the Rifle, Masad Ayub in The Greatest Extreme, David Kinnick's Armed Response, Gabriel Suarez's Tactical Pistol, Andy Stafford's Surgical Speed Shooting, Chris Bird's Thank God I Had a Gun, Mark Young's Street Safe, and Chad Cantrell's No Bull Gunfighting. The gun section of my personal library started that day, and at one point it was comprised of at least 60 other books before I started easing up on the book buying bench. I have practiced the concepts and the techniques explained in those books faithfully. I spent hundreds of hours at the local target range, learning how to shoot, perfecting my marksmanship. I have befriended numerous local firearms instructors and gun shop employees throughout the Metro Detroit area to glean and retain whatever knowledge they had to bestow. I joined gun-themed internet bulletin boards. Probably heard of them. They're still around. Michigan Gun Owners, Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners, AR-15, The High Road, Glock Talk, and many others. Finally, I had reached a point where I felt that my learning curve had steepened to such a point that further research was delivering diminishing returns. Simply put, the act of spending a day to read a new book might teach me something that I didn't previously know. I then turned to and joined the nation's oldest firearms organization, the National Rifle Association, the NRA. Currently, well, at that time, I had certifications, and my base level certification I got from my first instructor class was personal protection, basic pistol, and home firearm safety. I qualified to be an NRA certified firearms instructor. A candidate must meet certain admission requirements, take a grueling class, and pass 6 timed examinations with the score of 90% correct or better on each examination, and must meet that training counselor's expectations of teaching ability. Not many people qualify. Also, I'm an NRA Chief Range Safety Officer and Range Safety Officer. I have numerous other certifications, but that's not really the point of my sharing with you all today. The point is that training and further training is important, and you need to continue and learn more. I have personally provided firearms training to people from all walks of life: ex-military, FBI agents, business owners, stay-at-home moms, college students, real estate agents, business execs, bouncers at bars, waitresses, club DJs, you name it, I've trained them. I've even thus far have trained many people who hold public office. I truly feel that I am doing what I was called to do. God has placed many people on my path and has given me his mission to do this will. I feel that I am hands down the best firearms instructor in the Metro Detroit area. I stress safety, teach with enthusiasm in an entertaining manner, and I never take any shortcuts. I have met many people in this industry, and some, well, they didn't measure up. Some of them don't cover the legal training. Some of them use, man, there was people that were using airsoft pistols for target qualifications. Some have questionable certifications. You know, there's a lot of people in this industry, and you got to be careful. Some of them quite simply couldn't teach. Bad instructors not only do a disservice to their students, but also to the community as a whole, because their practices make the streets even more dangerous. I have testimonials that I collected. I still get them from time to time. Firearms instruction is my passion. I am literally making a difference in my community, one class at a time. No one, in my opinion, becomes an instructor to get rich. Quite simply, if you have integrity and do things the right way and by the book, it probably will not happen. The scam artists in this industry, well, eventually they get found out and discovered and get shut down sooner or later. I teach because I want to empower people to defend themselves in an increasingly violent time. Many folks are surprised to learn that the police do not have a legal responsibility to protect you. Their job is to uphold the general peace and to investigate crimes. If you become a crime victim, you can't hold them responsible. For many, that's a very sobering thought. I am a firearms instructor and a defender of freedom and an empowering force in my community. Activism is, of course, the next logical step. Once a person, for whatever reason, decides to exercise a right, he eventually acquires a great appreciation for having that right. Accordingly, he will do what is ever necessary, whatever it takes to keep that right. Gun ownership and the right to keep and bear arms is it's continuously under attack by those people in our society who want a disarmed populace. Never mind that gun ownership was granted to citizens of our fine nation as a means to prevent tyranny and to preserve liberty. I am most concerned with having the ability to defend my life and those that I love and that I care about. After all, in case after case, the courts have proclaimed that the police do not have a legal responsibility to protect us. It would be too easy to let others fight for my rights. I could merely write a check and let various other gun rights organizations such as the NRA, the Second Amendment Foundation, and the Citizens Committee to the Right to Keep and Bear Arms do my fighting for me. The future of gun ownership depends on us, you, and me. Some people could care less about the Second Amendment until they have a need for a gun. If gun ownership is made illegal, how can you get one in your time of need? There are currently over 20,000 gun laws on the books, and more are being drafted with the purpose of being enacted into law with each passing day. We don't need more laws. We certainly at least need enforcement of the ones that are already on the books. We need citizens like you to exercise your right. Get a permit to carry. Hell, even go hunting. Teach your family and friends how to shoot. Engage in the hunting sports. And teach people you know the truth about guns. Everything you've been told about guns is probably wrong until you remove emotions and uneducated opinions about guns from the public discourse. You may believe lies that are being told to you. For example, the biggest lie ever told is that guns cause violence and crime. Nothing could be further from the truth. A firearm is a tool, nothing more, nothing less. It is far more important to discuss how a tool is used by a particular person rather than to debate whether an inanimate object is bad. Is a ballpoint pen evil? How about a cane? While a gun has several obvious purposes that most people can readily enumerate, other tools designed for other legitimate tasks in the wrong hands can create as much mayhem. A person could misuse the following items and cause severe bodily harm or death to another: a baseball bat, a pair of scissors, a ball-peen hammer, a nail gun, a golf club, an automobile, a steak knife, an awl, an ice pick, tire iron, a crowbar, an axe, a garbage can lid, fireplace poker, a jump rope, a bowling trophy, a textbook, a container of gasoline, rat poison, a garden rake, or even a bottle of battery acid. A gun placed on a kitchen countertop cannot harm anyone all by itself. It requires assistance, pressure on its trigger to be used. Whether those purposes are for good or for evil. No one wants to debate the folly of banning matches whenever an arsonist starts a barbecue on Angel's Night. Likewise, no one wants to ban the usage of water every time a young and unattended child falls into a backyard swimming pool. Even more outrageous is the idea that gun manufacturers should be sued for violence committed by criminals. Has anyone ever sued the Ford Motor Company because a drunk driver mowed down a schoolyard full of children? Guns don't kill. People kill. Some people want you to think that guns somehow turn otherwise law-abiding citizens into homicidal sociopaths. The truth of the matter is that if a specific person with a gun is crazy, that same person without a gun is just as nuts. University of Maryland professor and gun control researcher Dr. John R. Lott Jr. has extensively studied the supposed gun and crime relationship link, most notably in his critically acclaimed book, More Guns, Less Crime. The conclusion of his work is abundantly clear. The absence of guns creates more crime. Reversely stated, more guns in a community actually decreases crime. An unarmed populace creates a hazard-free working environment for violent criminals. Robbings, stabbings, and pillaging is a dangerous career choice. Every time a criminal plies his trade, the risk, at least an injury or perhaps death. Criminals, if given a choice, will choose an easy target rather than get into a life or death battle with a lawfully armed citizen. Correspondingly, if many people in a community are armed with a gun, crime plummets due to the fact that the criminal is reluctant to assault someone that might be packing. Thus, the unarmed people in the community are, as a direct result of the armed people in the community, shielded from crime. Don't believe me? When was the last time you saw an advocate for gun control post a sign on his home's front yard which stated, "We are unarmed. We hate guns"? File that under something you will never, ever see. By definition, a criminal is a person who breaks the law. Thus, if it was ever possible to outlaw guns, only the criminals would have guns. You don't expect a criminal to disarm himself, do you? Of course not. Only a law-abiding citizen would consider doing such a thing. What result would you expect in a city full of law-abiding and unarmed citizens and a sizable quantity of armed felons? This type of environment would create an open season state of lawlessness amongst the criminals. The rapists, the jackers, and killers could ply their evil trade with impunity. This result has been observed with predictable results in our country. Time and time again, the cities with the highest rates of crime are usually those cities with the most strict gun control laws, legal and de facto. To name a few: New York City, Washington, D.C., Camden, New Jersey. The list goes on and on and on. It is no mistake, gun control has racist roots that trace back into time when newly freed slaves were barred from owning guns to prevent any score settling with former masters. Stop being a pawn. Buy a gun. Exercise your rights to self-defense and help spread the truth about guns. What's going on, everyone? Who do we have online here? John Olasinki, I see you, man. How are you, sir? How's everybody's evening going? How did you guys like that essay? Anyway, I felt like using one of my essays I had wrote a while back to put it out there for conversation. And again, I do have an event coming up, and every time I do something or I'm online or I'm publishing something, I'm going to be letting folks know about it. Uh, hey, Michael Magruder, we are going to be having on May 17th a firearm training event for women. It is my goal to train 1,000 women in one day how to operate a firearm. And we're going to do that. Registration, I know I've talked about it before. It's going to open on Mother's Day. If you register or attempt to register on Mother's Day, you will be allowed to register. There will be plenty of slots. Anyone that truly desires to register for this event will be admitted and will be issued a ticket. One thing that I'm doing, these past few days is that I've been running a fundraiser for this event due to the fact of the interesting times that we find ourselves in. There are a few things that I'm going to need this time around that I had not needed in times before. I'm going to need things like cleaning supplies and cleaning bags and disinfectants and cleansers and hearing muffs and individual safety glasses, not the community safety glass. Everyone's going to be issued safety glasses for themselves. Targets. And these additional expenses, they require additional funds, to do this event on the level that I'm going to be required to do it. I'm going to need to run a fundraiser, and I am confident that those who support me and who support this event will show up and will support us. Currently, our first level goal, $4,000, that'll handle those things that I was looking for. Additional funds beyond that can be donated, mostly for marketing and promotion. And the last level of support is for having something as a giveaway. If I receive the support, I will have some nice t-shirts made up and give out one per student that comes through. So we're talking about 1,000 t-shirts, but that's not the most important thing. The most important things that are those level A stuff that I was talking about. The cleaning materials, the disinfectants, the cleansers, hearing muffs, shooting glasses, for everyone to have and own individually, and targets. These are the things that I need. But, we have time, and we are in some curious times these days, but we stay at it, we'll get it, and we'll be able to do a great thing. We'll be able to train a lot of women and empower some folks and make them safe. Um, I'm going to be checking off for a minute. I've been online for a spell. Anybody have any questions for me? I'll take them and I'll get them added to the presentation. Ha! Ken Peterson asked me, so what was my first gun? My very first firearm was a 12 gauge shotgun. My first pistol, and it was one of those Smith and Wesson 9mm Sigmas. They were the Glock knockoffs. There was a big lawsuit between Glock and Smith and Wesson back in the day, and Smith and Wesson had to pay Glock some money because Glocks were, and probably in the minds of many people today, the industry leaders in personal protection handguns. Some people don't like them. They call them little plastic guns. But you know what? I'll tell you this. I am a Glock fan. I'm sorry. I dig Glock. They're cool. Anything else? Anybody else have anything else for me? Okay. Well, you know what? I enjoyed having you on tonight, and I wish you all a great evening. Be safe, and I will talk to you all pretty soon.